let's come back to our consideration that it's not the repetitions, but it's the iterations with sometimes very minute emendations or in new facets of a jewel-like visionary person seeing that this begins to have a radiance that has a special kind of a dynamic. It has a movement which is a movement that we are familiar with in dance. And dance becomes a clue for us, an art form that illuminates for us some of the qualities that seem to those who are nano-detailed, mechanistically, cognitively, neuro-triggered, not only miss, but have no way whatsoever of understanding or appreciating or knowing that this is going on, that this is meaningful beyond all of the cues. When a director is working with his ensemble, with a play, to put on the stage or on camera, the bare bones of the ritual is to block out the action. Given this, in this way, at this time, such and so meet in this confluence. And their movements generate this angular momentum that dramatically begins to take hold, and the audience is swept along because the actors themselves are swept along. They're no longer just lines or costumes or characters. The play is operating. It's magic. There is a great book published by Princeton, came out 1982, no less, called Parayana. The subtitle, Pindar and Dance. Pindar was one of the founders of what is known in classical literature as the lyric ode. And the lyric ode is one of the highest soaring, high water reaches of poetry, of poetic in the world. He was born about 525 BC, and a close contemporary of his was Aeschylus. In fact, they were friends. They were about the same age. And just like Aeschylus founded Greek tragedy, Pindar founded lyric poetry at the same time. And when they were young men together, Thebes for Pindar, Athens for Aeschylus, a legacy of the older Pythagoras began to weave its magic. By this time, Aeschylus, who was in his early 70s, moved from Samos, where he had gone back to after 50-some years. He was 56 years old when he went back to Samos. He had studied in Egypt for 22 years, in Persia for 11 years, had done many things to refine himself, and had finally left the Ionian coast of classical Greece for the southern boot of Italy. At that time, not called Italy, but Magna Graecia, Greater Greece, because it was the Wild West. It was new. It was Sicily and southern Italy at the same time, which are now so bound into mafioso-type traditions. Southern Italy, the Calabrian gang structure is even tighter than the mafia gang structure. You can hardly move or breathe. But then, 2,500 years ago, it was the West that was wild and open and had this quality of having a direct front seat on Africa, just across the Mediterranean Sea. That one could do a stepping stone from the boot of Italy to Sicily to Malta to where Tunisia is today. And it's just a stepping stone, and one gets the sense that the classical world had opened into a vastness that was possible. And so the whole of northern Africa, that coast, became like an enchantment for them. And this led, within a couple of hundred years, of Alexander the Great from northern Greece, from Macedonia, who took over what his father had done a lot of conquering to establish, Philip II. He immediately, in his earliest 20s, set out to conquer the rest of the world. Had he not died in his early 30s, he would have done so. He did get as far as India. He got as far as the Ganges River in India. Before everything conspired, the men did not want to go further. The opposition was like huge on the other side of the Ganges, and he was more interested in letting mature what he had conquered all the way from Greece to India, which was the ancient classic vision of civilization. It had gone that far some 2,000 years before Alexander the Great was born, and they knew it. They were very wise. His teacher was Aristotle, whose teacher was Plato, whose teacher was Socrates, whose teacher was Diotima of Mantinea, whose teacher was Pythagoras. They understood that there had been an ancient trading route that went all the way into India, all of the Indus rivers of civilization. All of those great rivers that made a convergence and that suffused that land with the sense of ancient India. By 2350 BC, Sargon of Akkad, as a young man, was already having the vision to unite all of that old Sumerian cities together, to bring it into a new transform from his capital, Akkad, which has been conveniently lost so that everyone says that no one knows where it is. He established that Fertile Crescent and then all the resonances from it. The Fertile Crescent not only went from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea, but went out into the Mediterranean to Cyprus and went all the way across Persia, the Persian Empire, all the way into northern Indus Valley, India. And when he conquered that, he went beyond the Rajasthan desert that had stopped the Persians and went all the way to the Ganges. And in order to do this, he had confirmed that his lineage, his parentage, was not of some Macedonian king. That he was suffused because of his mother, Olympia, with an African spirit that only came through the feminine. And so he did a detour instead of going against the Persians right away. He did a detour to go to Egypt so that he could go along the coast of Egypt on the Mediterranean and then take an ancient route deep into the Sahara Desert to Siwa. And at the great oasis of Siwa, which ran cool in the daytime and then ran warm in the nighttime, is the ancient site by which Amun-Ra had his harmonia toned to resonate throughout the world. And he found from the priests at Siwa that he was indeed of that gifted spirit. Had nothing to do with the limitations of a Macedonian king. Had everything to do with a mother who had been in that visionary receptivity all of her life and was not just a queen consort of Philip II, this king sleeping around. She was her own mysterious person carrying that entire mitochondrial DNA quality and had gifted her son with it. And that he was always shown with two ram's horns within the brain of his skull, because those ram's horns were the way in which ancient Amun had the strength of the flock, of the ram, of the sheep, the central shepherd, of the top ram, the Aries energy, that he could bring a new vision into being so that everyone would have a place of life. And that there would be those who understood from that who would be the shepherds of men. And the very first treatise in the Hermetica is called the Poimandres, the Shepherd of Men. It was written in 90 A.D. in Alexandria. And at the very same time in India, Ashvaghosha wrote his Shraddhopada Shastra, The Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana. These are linked because in ancient Celtic Britain, exactly at the same time, about 90 A.D., the cup of the Last Supper that had been there because it was taken by the owners of the house in which the Last Supper took place. One of Jesus' sisters, Mary, and her husband, Cleophas. Cleophas from Cyprus, from Aphrodite's island. When their son, Mark, who became Saint Mark, was about 10 years old, He was the water carrier to deliver for the wine to be mixed. In the second story of his parents' house in Jerusalem, Cleophas and his brother Barnabas were very wealthy trading family through shipping. All of the people around Jesus were involved in international commerce by shipping mainly and by caravans. Like Sargon the Great's great caravan route was sustained by these black-haired, tough donkeys called asses, onagers, special breed, because this was, rather than the camel, the vehicle by which Sargon was able to go from the Mediterranean coast all the way to India with a caravan route that was not dependent upon shipping. And because it stretched thousands and thousands of miles 4,400 years ago. And his language, his heritage, his people were Northern Semitic. And the Akkadian language was a Semitic language that thousands of years since the inheritors of that tradition became, with Abraham, Jews, the international trading genius through dozens and scores of languages, has been one of the mainstays of civilization. That this is something that is done because one understands and knows. But the push of that feminine mitochondrial DNA that Olympias was able to bestow upon Alexander the Great was a part of the ancient African understanding of wisdom that was also there in ancient India. The myopic labeling says that they were Dravidians. They weren't white, they were dark. They were black. My teacher of the Bhagavad Gita at the University of Wisconsin, an agronomist, a soil engineer, Sudarshan Puri, was from Nagpur, at the edge of the Deccan desert, right in the middle, really, of it. But if you go further to the east, you begin to get into all kinds of civilized kingdoms that were powerful and so forth. But in the Deccan, the black Indians were the pre-Vedic geniuses of India, just like the black Africans are the way in which the Egyptian wisdom tradition was able to come into its fruition. So that you have this enormous spread of a way in which India and Egypt have an incredible affinity. They have what the Greek word harmonia means, and it's always paired with tonos. The harmony and the tone go together, and one can understand that though there is a symbolic pattern to a scale, like a musical scale. Yeah, there's an octave or a pentave. There are these notes. But the way in which those notes have an infinite harmonia is guided by the rotational, the chiral, spiraling genius of the intonation, which carries with it, because it is with it, the feeling tones. You can have the symbolic structure of a scalar, but without the feeling tones of the experience. There's no music, there's no dance, there's no poetic. And so it is this quality that is there at a great transformation, a reference wave transformation of Sargon and his daughter Enheduanna, that comes to light 350 years later in this incredible way in which there is a new carrier wave that brings into play something which attends even more to the invisible than the visible, even more than the scalars to the symbolic, diagrammatic details of an empire like the Roman Empire. In fact, at the very same time that the Roman Empire was being scaled and planned and made, and the making of the Roman Empire by Augustus Caesar was cemented as a worldwide phenomenon by starting in 13 BC to make a temple of the eternal peace of Augustus on the banks of the Tiber River, where the Via Flaminia came in from northern Italy, from all of the northern areas that became Europe, and entered into the eternal city, Rome, right there at that point where the Tiber begins a little bit of a curve. And in that curve, if you went on a straight line from the temple, the Ara Pacis Augusti, kitty corner across the Tiber, the first big building that you come to is a great fort. And just on the other side of the fort, on the same line, is the Vatican. And just across the Via Flaminia is the great mausoleum of Augustus Caesar and his wife Livia, to whom the temple was dedicated, and it was finished in 9 BC. That's when Jesus was born. When the dedication of the Ara Pacis Augusti took place, he was born on Passover 9 BC. It is this kind of equality that, without having the amplitude of spontaneous realization, one gets lost in the darkness of their eyes, as Black Elk once said of the white men. They get lost in the darkness of their eyes, in their pupils, because they're only registering what they see that they want. They see her, they see that, they see possibilities of getting this, they see themselves getting, having, holding, wanting. And you can diagram it. Anger, lust, and greed, with 3 animals that personify them: the rooster, the snake, the pig. And that's the center of the great mandalas in Tibet. That's what keeps the whole thing spinning, and the outer rim of that kind of wheel of life has a rim of the ghosts, the pretas. The ghost world is what that wheel of life in that way runs on, is the hungry ghosts. Nothing is left of life. All of that is illusion. To live it is delusion. To insist upon it is an empire madness, is a neurocognitive fever. The doctor of civilization is hanging the shingle up, open for learning. The first translation of the Rig Veda into English took place exactly at the same time that the conclusion of the Ajanta studies was finally published in 6 great volumes by a man who is now 86, and his first book was The Axis of Eros. It is impossible to understand that the transform that comes out of sexuality into love is not at all channeled through some kind of anger, lust, and greed. It is differentially a harmonia. It has a tone which, if the experience has its fullness and healthfulness, the symbol structure is not at all opaque or mirror-like, showing you who have got this, or what you've got, or who you're looking forward to get. Like Rachel Maddow, right? The invisible dimensions that come spontaneously like time itself out of a mystery, that the zero field of nature is a fertile vacuum that generates spontaneously and absorbs spontaneously, so that subatomic particles come in and out of play, out of phenomenality, and back into mystery all the time. It's always going on. It's called vibration. The study of it is called vibronics, and there are textbooks in there. I'll bring one next week. The title is Vibronic Coupling. An Israeli physicist decided that he was going to try to understand what's going on here with the frequencies of resonance, and on the molecular level, on the atomic level, on the subatomic level, and entitled his book, I'll bring it next week, Vibronic Coupling. Pairing, says Lao Tzu, is at the deepest root of all that is, and it emerges and absorbs billions of times per time unit, like time itself. Nothing is finer grained than time, and its finest fabric is space. Where is 80% of the missing universe? Space itself. What is that dark energy? Time itself. Until you get your physics straight, there's very little chance you're going to have a philosophia. You're not going to understand that revering her is a love reality. There's so much more to bring out, and that's why we're doing the rest of the year for it. The notes include not only the realization that the ancient harmonia that came with Pindar and Aeschylus was that there is a dance movement which is primordial in nature herself. Mother Nature, I used to call the Sanskrit for that mother, like Mother Nature, Prakriti. I used to call her Ma Prakriti. She is very happy with Purusha, which is that masculine quality of that radiance that is energized because he is at home with her. And she's at home with his being at home with her. And in this way, reality does its fabulous dancing. The quality of Greek dancing and music. One of the best books done on it is Warren D. Anderson, Music and Musicians in Ancient Greece, Cornell University Press, 1994. But the esoteric origin of that kind of a thing was an early monograph by a kind of a genius. It's published in a reprint here. Its original edition was 1936. Mode in Ancient Greek Music, W.P. Ingram, Winnington Ingram, and he has this to say. Inspiration to the study of Greek music comes to most of those who have felt it from wonder at the musical legislation of Plato and Aristotle, from references to music in the Greek poets, from a realization of the way in which music permeated Greek life, from the Homeric period onward. The student soon finds, however, that his researches lead him into dusty places. The modes, the harmonia that seemed so powerful for good or evil to the philosophers must be sought among the controversies of professors in dry manuals out of date perhaps centuries before they were written, or in actual melodies that may in some cases be no more than the hack work of their own late day. By delving in such places, we can learn something. We can learn about the forms and structure of scales as they are presented in Greek theory, but a scale is a mere list of notes. If we are to begin to have a conception of the kind of music written in it, we must know something of the relationship of the notes that it contains, the hierarchy of its importance. For the democracy of atonality is a recent occurrence. Schoenberg's atonality treatise on harmonics of music was 1909, just about 25 years before this. It is in the tone of the voice that the feminine wisdom immediately and faster, spontaneously understands what is going on. That the choreography is not only crystal clear, it is jewel radiant. To not know that is to never have learned. More next week.